welcome to Harrison Hacks.
Hey guys, welcome back to Harrison Hacks. Today I want to show you a whole bunch of cores, HMODs basically, for HackG 2. These work on your SNES Classic as well as your NES Classic Edition. So first thing I'm going to do is just go through the cores with you here. So if I go to Modules, Install Extra Modules, you can see I have a whole bunch. And they've got little readmes on the right side. So you'll see 4DO, so this module adds support for 3DO. Then you also have the BIOS, so you would want both. So this says REQ required. So if you wanted 3DO, you would just check both of those. The BIOS for CPS2. If you're doing any kind of emulation, whether it's Final Burn Alpha, Mame 2003, or 2010, if you're doing any arcade emulation, I suggest installing this. Basically, it just auto installs the BIOS for you. Here is the MSX BIOS, and again it says required. Now we have the BIOS for the Gen Plus GX lock-on, and it just says this will add support for a lock-on feature to Genesis Plus GX in RetroArch. And this is an optional. If you're doing SegaCd, then you're going to want to put in this required because it's the SegaCd BIOS, and this runs, as you can see, 32X or SegaCd. Here is the Sega Master System optional. Handy for the Atari Lynx. Optional BIOS here. PCFX, this is required BIOS if you're going to be running PCFX games. Optional Game Boy Advance BIOS. I install this when I install MGBA. It is optional, it runs without it, but I just prefer it. It's not a large file. Now if you're using this BIOS Neo Geo, this is new. So this works with FBA or Mame 2010. If you're using the Neo Geo Old, this works for FBA as well, but it also works for Mame 2003. So most of the games that I found run the best with Mame 2003. Final Burn Alpha, there's a couple I guess that run better through Final Burn Alpha, but for most, Mame 2003 is the way to go, and Mame 2010 has a couple that run better as well. So the Unibios, if you're familiar, this will run with your FBA 2012, FBA, or Neo Geo. And this is the old BIOS. Basically, Odyssey 2 Video Pack BIOS, this is required. The PCE Fast TurboGrafx CD, PC Engine CD. This is an optional BIOS. Now this one here is required. So I usually just install the required, works great. PCX Rearmed Neon, which is a core that is for your PlayStation 1. Another thing to point out is that if you add a game and it says bin-zip, make sure if it's a PSX game or whatever type of game that it has this command line. So this one would be PCSX. Here's an optional Pro System. This is for Atari 7800, optional BIOS. And Yabos is optional. I suggest installing this, and this is if you want to run Sega Saturn games. I have not tested a Sega Saturn game on the SNES Classic just yet, so I'm not sure how well they run. I do want to try them. And now we'll get into the actual cores. So we've got Amstrad CPC, the game Dino Thwor, I'm not sure about that. DOSBox, this is for chip 8, which is MUX chip 8. FB Alpha. Of all the FB Alphas, there's a lot. There's FB Alpha, there's 2012, CPS1, CPS2, CPS3, and Neo Geo. I just find that FB Alpha runs games fine, provided you install the BIOSes, which is the Neo Geo and the CPS2 BIOS. But again, It gives you a description on the right hand side. But I prefer just the FB Alpha. This is for MSX, ZX Spectrum. Gambat is for your Game Boy and Game Boy Color. Genesis plus GX. This runs Genesis, Sega Master System, Game Gear, SG-1000, and SegaCd as well. Or MegaCd as well, or Mega Drive. Gloopin 64, Nintendo 64 games. I wouldn't recommend putting N64 games on your SNES Classic. It's not going to run very many of them very well, and they take up a lot of space, and you're pretty limited on this system. So this one does add support for game music. I'm not too familiar with that. Here is Game & Watch. This is the Atari Lynx. So the Atari Lynx BIOS is what I showed earlier. This is the actual Atari Lynx HMOD. Image viewer. Lutro. Then we have Mame 2000, Mame 2003, and Mame 2010. So for games like Tapper, then I use Mame 2010. Works great. For most, I use Mame 2003. And for anything else, I recommend using FB Alpha. Just the standard one. The arcade stuff is kind of hit and miss. It's trial and error. But I tried Bad Dudes and Contra with FB Alpha, and I found it was kind of sluggish. So then I tried them again with Mame 2003, and they worked perfectly. Now remember, you're going to need the Mame 2003 ROM set of like those version of ROMs, or the 2010 version of ROMs, or the Final Burn Alpha version of ROMs, for whichever you're using, which core. I know that sounds really confusing, guys, and unfortunately I cannot link you to the ROMs or the BIOSes, which the BIOSes are included in this pack as HMODs. And I will show you a couple cool things after we go through this list. So here's Neo Geo Pocket. This one here is going to do TurboGrafx 16 as well as TurboGrafx CD. This one does PCFX, Super Graphics. Here is Virtual Boy, and Virtual Boy runs fine. I ran Virtual Wario Land, works great. Here is WonderSwan Color. MGBA is for your Game Boy and Game Boy Colors, and Game Boy Advance. So for me, Game Boy and Game Boy Color, I use Gambat, and for Game Boy Advance, I use MGBA. Mupin 64 Plus, again, this is another Nintendo 64 core. Probably the most recommended. I wouldn't use N64 on my SNES Classic, but it's up to you. So NX Engine for the Cave Story games. This is Odyssey 2 Video Pack. Here is your PlayStation. So PSX Rearm Neon. Pico Drive, this is for Sega 32X. Pokemini, PR Boom, Pro Systems for 7800. You're going to want this. This is the actual RetroArch itself. So you're going to want to install this. Then you have a bunch of cheats for different systems. SNES, from what I've heard, 2010 would be the one to go with, and this is for problematic games. So you can go ahead and install one of those. And one thing I want to point out, when you install RetroArch, you don't need a NES core. This comes with NES right here, built right in. So it's NES is built into the RetroArch. And again, with your problematic Super Nintendo games, it's, from my research, SNES 9X 2010 is the one to go with. We have Stella for 2600 games. And then this is TGB Dual Core, so this is Game Boy and Game Boy Color for Dual Link. Not familiar at all. This is support for the Quake games. VBA Next is another Game Boy Advance. I use MGBA. Yeah, MGBA. VBAM. This is another Game Boy Advanced. VecX is Vectrex. Then we have Commodore 64, Atari Jaguar, and then this is our Sega Saturn. And then you have the extra space, and these are the ones that come with it. But I want to get into this pack right here. So I'm going to leave a link in the description, and it's going to take you to this page here. And this is KMFD Manic NESC SNESC Core BIOS HMOD set. This is a GitHub page, and he's constantly updating. He has a YouTube channel. His name is Kyland K, and I'll leave a link in the description to his YouTube channel as well. Check him out. Give him a like and a subscribe. Very, very knowledgeable. Seems like a really genuine guy, and he is top notch when it comes to all this SNES Classic and all that kind of stuff. NES Classic. He's top notch when it gets to this stuff, man. And again, he's always updating everything. Check out his channel. He'll show you some really cool stuff. And I think the NES Classic, he managed to fit like 5,000 games on that small little flash memory. So I mean, that's really cool. I'm definitely a subscriber to his channel, and he's the one that took the time to make all of these and modify them to work for all of us to enjoy. So go ahead and check these out in the description. And I'm going to show you when you download his pack, you're going to get, as of today, October 15th, 2017, this is his pack, and I've extracted it. So basically, I just took all of these here, except for that folder that says Dependencies and Extras. And we'll get to that in a moment. I just highlighted everything, copy, and I went to my HackG folder, HackG2, user mods, and I pasted them in here. So I'm not going to do it now because they're already there, but I pasted them all in here, and that's what adds them. So if we go into his pack again, whoops, we're going to go into the dependencies and extras, and you can see that you have Mame BIOS HMOD. Now you don't really need this because there is nothing in here right now. There's no BIOSes, but he gives you a little README here. So this tells you how to do the samples. So the BIOSes I showed you are already HMODs. So let's pass that one, and let's go to Mame samples, etc. libretro system, and then we have Mame 2002 samples. That's empty. 2003 samples. 2010 samples. So most of the games I run are Mame 2003, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this folder, go into my HackG, user mods, and I'm going to paste it here. Now we have this. So I'm going to open it up, etc. libretro system. Now I'm going to go to Mame 2003 and go into samples. Now I need my samples from Mame 2003. And again, I cannot link you to these, unfortunately, guys. You will have to do some Googling. But if I go to HackG2 in my old HackG, user mods, Mame samples, etc. libretro system, Mame 2003 samples, we have some samples. Once you have your samples, you just copy, paste them into that folder, and within HackG, we should get an option here. We go down for Mame samples, and there you go. So your samples will install once you install this module. It'll automatically put these exactly where they need to be on your SNES Classic or your NES Classic Edition. I know a lot of this is confusing, but it's not that difficult. Just watch this video through and kind of just take your time. He does have some other stuff in here. So this one here is the CRT hack. This is NES Classic only, this HMOD. There's a RetroArch Extreme filters. So previously this was NES Classic only. From my knowledge now, this is going to work on the SNES Classic as well. And this gives you a bunch of different filters within RetroArch. And then we have these dual cores. Now I'm not familiar with these. If I find out a little bit more, I will post an update. And then you have the Clover app, which is if you want the RetroArch on your system menu. So again, this is Kyle and Kay's build, or not build, his HMODs, and this is his set. So I just wanted to give you guys a run through of all of the ones, and I'm going to show you some command lines. So when you add a Mega Drive game, it's automatically MD, and this is Sega Genesis as well. Virtual Boy will automatically go to VB, so bin/VB. NES will automatically be bin/NES. 32X, same thing. Sega Master System will be SMS. Power Rangers. So Power Rangers just comes in as a canoe, which is the SNES Classics native emulator. So let's say I was going to add a problematic game. So I'll drag Uniracers, and I'm going to get a little pop-up here. Let me just close this out. Here, I'll click the pop-up. Seems like Uniracers is not going to work correctly with the original emulator. Do you want to use a third-party emulator for this game? It needs to be installed. I'll click yes. So now this says SNES. So in order to make that work, you're going to want to make sure that you install your SNES 2010 is the one that I would recommend. So we'll move on to Game Boy Advance. There's GBA. This is TurboGrafx 16. It'll say PCE. Now, for Sega Saturn, when I added this game, I just wanted to see. I haven't tested it yet. This did not say Yabouse. It went like this. It went bin ISO. And that won't let it run. Even if you install your modules, it will not run. So what you need to do is just get rid of the ISO and put Yabouse. And make sure there's a space between Yabouse and the /. Here's Altered Beast, so a Sega Genesis game. So here you can see when you add any arcade ROMs, it looks like this, your command line. bin/zip. So if you're running, let's say I wanted to run 1943 through Mame 2010. I don't, but let's say I did. I would change that zip to Mame 2010. And 1942, if you want to use Mame 2003, then you would type Mame 2003. And 1941, if you wanted to use Final Burn Alpha, you just put FBA. And then you have your original games as well, which you don't need to change anything. And that's pretty much it. I mean, the way that I set mine up, I guess we could do this real quick here. Oh wait, I have to exit out. Do you want to cancel? Yes, because tools. Yes, so pages folder structure, I go to custom. And when I go to maximum games per page, I do 60. Now this works for me with no errors, and so that's what I set it to, always 60. The other thing I do is the controller hacks. I just have it as select and down, and that's how I like it. Click OK. So we'll go here. OK. So I have a bunch of folders here, and I've added artwork to them. And you can see I have some unsorted here. So I know that 1941, 42, and 43, they're arcade games. Bravo Man is TurboGrafx-16. Power Rangers and Uniracers is Super Nintendo. World Series Baseball is Sega Genesis. And I do not have a Sega Saturn folder. So what I'm going to do is just rename, now that I only have a Sega Saturn game in there. Sega Saturn. And I'm going to see if I have a Sega Saturn cover here. I don't think I do. Yeah. So I don't have a Sega Saturn folder cover, but I would just put one, whichever you choose. I have a bunch of systems here. Unfortunately, not the Sega Saturn. Which is fine. And then you would just click OK and do your games, if you guys are familiar with HackG. That's pretty much it, guys. Like, I hope I didn't ramble on too much, but I tried to explain as much as I could. And it's, like I said, with the arcade games, mostly it's trial and error, but just be sure to, whatever systems you're adding, make sure you do install the modules and also your BIOSes. Very, very important. So, really appreciate you guys watching. I want to give another shout out to Kyle and Kay. Excellent work, man. Definitely, this is a phenomenal core set. And the fact that you just keep updating and making things better is, I mean, and you do it so fast. My hat's off to you, sir. Really appreciate you guys watching. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel. Most importantly, have a good day.